Welcome, dear friends, for a tale of love, deception, and unexpected kindness. Enjoy the story. The late afternoon sun filtered through the half-drawn curtains of Jack and Emily's modest apartment. The air was thick with tension as the couple stood facing each other, their voices rising with each passing moment. "Jack, you're not listening to me!" Emily exclaimed, her perfectly manicured hands gesticulating wildly. "This is our wedding we're talking about. It's supposed to be the most important day of our lives." Jack ran a hand through his disheveled hair, his exhaustion evident in the dark circles under his eyes. I hear you, I do. But we have to be realistic. We can't afford a wedding at the plaza with a guest list of 300 people." Emily's eyes flashed with frustration. "But my cousins had their weddings there. It's a family tradition." "Your cousins aren't paying off medical school debt," Jack retorted, his voice tinged with bitterness. "I'm doing my best here, but we need to cut corners somewhere." Emily's lower lip trembled. "So what? You want us to get married at the courthouse and have a potluck reception in the park?" Jack sighed heavily. "That's not what I'm saying. I just think we need to find a middle ground. Maybe a nice restaurant reception instead of a hotel ballroom?" "A restaurant?" Emily scoffed. "God, Jack, do you even want this wedding at all?" Before Jack could respond, Emily grabbed her purse from the couch. "I can't deal with this right now. I need some air." Wait," Jack started, but the door slammed shut before he could finish. The sudden silence in the apartment was deafening. Jack slumped onto the couch, his head in his hands. The weight of his financial struggles pressed down on him like a physical force. He glanced at the framed photo of him and Emily from medical school graduation day. They looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. "Some doctor I turned out to be," he muttered to himself. "Can't even give my fiancée the wedding of her dreams." He pulled out his phone, checking his bank balance for the umpteenth time that week. The numbers stared back at him, a stark reminder of the mountain of debt he was still climbing. Jack burst out of the apartment building, his white coat flapping behind him as he sprinted down the sidewalk. The bus was just pulling up to the stop half a block away. "Wait! Hold the bus!" he shouted, waving his arm frantically. The bus driver, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, saw him coming and held the door. "Cutting it close today, Doc," she said with a wink as Jack bounded up the steps, out of breath. "Thanks, Rosa," he panted, fishing for his pass. "You're a lifesaver." Jack hurried through the bustling corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, nodding quick hellos to colleagues as he passed. Just as he reached the staff locker room, a hand touched his shoulder. "Dr. Peterson?" It was Nancy, one of the head nurses. "Mary needs to see you in her office right away." Jack's stomach dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" Nancy shook her head. "No idea, hun, but she said it's urgent." Mary looked up as Jack entered, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Ah, Jack, thanks for coming so quickly. Have a seat." Jack lowered himself into the chair, trying to keep his nervousness at bay. "What's this about, Mary?" Mary leaned forward, her expression serious. "We've got an unusual situation. A very wealthy patient has requested a house call and she's specifically asked for you." Jack's brow furrowed. "Me? But I'm just a resident. Surely one of the attending physicians." Mary held up a hand. "This patient is quite insistent, and given her generous donations to the hospital over the years, we're inclined to accommodate her requests. Are you up for it?" Jack nodded slowly, curiosity overtaking his initial hesitation. "Of course. When do I leave?" Jack sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance, his medical bag clutched tightly in his lap. The driver, a burly man named Mike, glanced over at him. "So, Doc, any idea what we're walking into here?" Mike asked. Jack shook his head. "Your guess is as good as mine. All I know is that she's wealthy and specifically requested me." Mike let out a low whistle. "Must be nice to have that kind of pull. Maybe she'll leave you a nice tip, eh?" Jack chuckled nervously. "I doubt it. Probably just wants a second opinion on something minor." As they turned onto a tree-lined street of massive houses, Mike's eyes widened. "Minor, huh? Take a look at where we're headed, Doc." The ambulance pulled up to a set of ornate iron gates, which swung open as if by magic. They drove up a winding driveway, passing manicured lawns and elaborate fountains. At the end stood a mansion that looked like it belonged in the pages of a luxury real estate magazine. "Holy!" Jack breathed, taking in the sight. Mike parked in front of the grand entrance. "Well, Doc, looks like you've hit the jackpot with this house call. Good luck in there." A butler led Jack through opulent hallways adorned with priceless artwork and antiques. They stopped outside a set of double doors. "Mrs. Thompson is waiting for you, Doctor," the butler said, opening the doors with a flourish. Jack stepped into what appeared to be a bedroom larger than his entire apartment. Sitting up in a four-poster bed was an elderly woman, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite her apparent illness. "Ah, you must be Dr. Peterson," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "I'm Sarah Thompson. Thank you for coming on such short notice." Jack approached the bed, setting his bag down. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thompson. What seems to be the problem?" Sarah waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, just the usual aches and pains of old age. But that's not why I called you here, young man." Jack paused in the middle of taking out his stethoscope. "I'm not sure I understand." Sarah's eyes twinkled with mischief. "How would you like to make a lot of money, Dr. Peterson?" Jack's jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" Sarah leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I have a proposition for you, Dr. Peterson. I need someone to pretend to be my son for 1 month. In return, I'll pay you a sum that will clear all your debts and then some." Jack took a step back, his mind reeling. "Mrs. Thompson, I can't do that. It's unethical, not to mention illegal." Sarah chuckled. "My dear boy, there's nothing illegal about an old woman wanting some company. As for ethics, well, sometimes the ends justify the means, don't you think?" Jack shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I can't." $1 million, Sarah interrupted. "Tax-free." The number hit Jack like a physical blow. He thought of Emily, of the wedding she dreamed of the life they could have without the crushing weight of debt. "Why me?" he managed to ask. Sarah's expression softened. "Because you remind me of my late son, and because I can see in your eyes that you're a good man who's struggling. Let me help you, Jack." Jack stood frozen, torn between his ethics and the temptation of financial freedom. Jack unlocked the door to his apartment, his mind still spinning from Sarah's offer. As he stepped inside, he immediately noticed something was off. The place felt emptier. "Em?" he called out. No response. He walked into the bedroom and froze. Emily's closet was open and empty. Her makeup was gone from the dresser. On the bed was a note. With shaking hands, Jack picked it up and read, "Jack, I can't do this anymore. I love you, but I can't marry someone who doesn't share my dreams. I'm staying with my sister. You have 1 month to figure out if you want this wedding as much as I do. Emily." As if on cue, his phone rang. It was Emily. "Em, please," Jack said as soon as he answered. "Let's talk about this." Emily's voice was cold on the other end. "There's nothing to talk about, Jack. You have 1 month. Either you find a way to give me the wedding we both deserve or we're done." The line went dead. Jack sank onto the bed. The note crumpled in his fist. Slowly, he pulled out the business card Sarah had given him. He stared at it for a long moment before picking up his phone and dialing. "Mrs. Thompson, it's Dr. Peterson. I'll do it." Over the next few weeks, Jack's life transformed dramatically. He moved into Sarah's mansion, trading his scrubs for tailored suits and his cramped apartment for a luxurious suite. At first, it felt like an elaborate game of make-believe. Sarah introduced him to her high society friends as her son, spinning tales of his heroic work as a doctor in far-flung corners of the world. Jack found himself attending galas, polo matches, and charity auctions. He learned to navigate the world of the ultra-wealthy, all while continuing his regular shifts at the hospital. To his surprise, he began to enjoy Sarah's company. She was witty, sharp, and full of fascinating stories. In quiet moments, she would show him old photo albums, teaching him about the family history he was supposed to know. One sunny afternoon, Jack pushed Sarah's wheelchair along a winding path in the park. The sun was warm on their faces, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. "You know, Jack," Sarah said, breaking a comfortable silence, "I never told you why I really asked you to do this." Jack slowed their pace. "I assumed it was loneliness." Sarah nodded. Partly, but mostly it was because I wanted to give my fortune to someone who deserved it. Someone kind. Someone who would use it to make the world a little better. Jack stopped the wheelchair, moving to face Sarah. What are you saying? Sarah reached out and patted his hand. I'm saying that you've passed the test with flying colors, my dear. Whether you take the money or not, you've shown me that you're a good man. You remind me so much of my Thomas. Jack knelt beside the wheelchair. Tell me about him. As Sarah began to speak, her eyes misting with memories, Jack listened intently, realizing that for the first time, he was seeing her not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a mother who had loved and lost. Late one night, Jack snuck back to his apartment to water his plants. As he was about to leave, his phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Can we talk? I miss you. His heart raced as he dialed her number. Jack? Emily's voice was soft, vulnerable. Hey, Em, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. How are you? There was a pause. I'm okay. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe I overreacted about the wedding. I know you're doing your best. Jack closed his eyes, guilt washing over him. No, let me finish, she interrupted. I love you, Jack, and at the end of the day, that's what matters. Not the venue or the guest list, just us. Tears pricked at Jack's eyes. I love you too, Em, more than anything. So, Emily said, a smile evident in her voice. What do you say we just go down to City Hall next week and make it official? Jack's heart felt like it might burst. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Jack stood in Sarah's study, his hands clasped behind his back. Sarah sat behind her massive oak desk, looking at him with a mixture of pride and sadness. You're leaving, aren't you? She asked, though it wasn't really a question. Jack nodded. I'm sorry, Sarah. I can't keep lying to Emily. She deserves better than that. We're getting married next week. To his surprise, Sarah smiled. Good. I'm glad you made the right choice. I can't take your money, Jack said firmly. It wouldn't be right. Sarah stood up and walked around the desk. Jack, my dear boy, the money was never a payment. It was always a gift. A wedding present, if you will. Jack's eyes widened. But, Sarah held up a hand. No buts. You've given an old woman a month of joy and companionship. Let me give you and Emily the start you deserve. Tears welled up in Jack's eyes as he hugged Sarah tightly. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. Jack stood nervously in a simple suit, waiting at the end of a short aisle. The room was empty save for the officiant and a couple of witnesses provided by the court. The doors opened and Emily walked in. She wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with a small flower. To Jack, she had never looked more beautiful. As she reached him, he took her hands in his. You look amazing, he whispered. Emily smiled, her eyes shining. So do you. The officiant began the ceremony, but Jack barely heard the words. He was lost in Emily's eyes, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. I do, he said when the time came, his voice filled with certainty. I do, Emily echoed, squeezing his hands. As they kissed, sealing their vows, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Hand in hand, Jack and Emily stepped out into the sunlight, officially husband and wife. They paused on the steps, grinning at each other. So, Mrs. Peterson, Jack said, ready for our glamorous wedding reception at the diner down the street? Emily laughed, but before she could respond, a voice called out, I think we can do a bit better than that. They turned to see Sarah approaching, pushed in her wheelchair by Emily's sister. Behind them, a line of sleek black cars was parked at the curb. As Jack and Emily watched in amazement, caterers began unloading tables, chairs, and what looked like enough food to feed an army. What is all this? Jack stammered. Sarah's eyes twinkled. Did you really think I'd let my favorite doctor have a wedding without a proper celebration? As the impromptu reception took shape around them, Emily pulled Jack aside. Jack, she said, her voice a mix of awe and confusion, how do you know Sarah Thompson? Jack's mind raced. It's a long story. How do you know her? Emily bit her lip. She contacted me a month ago. Said she was a patient of yours and wanted to do something nice for us. I thought she was exaggerating about how much she wanted to help, but she gestured at the elaborate setup. Jack's jaw dropped as the pieces fell into place. You mean, this whole time? Emily nodded, a mischievous glint in her eye. We may have conspired a little. Are you mad? Jack looked from Emily to Sarah, who winked at him from across the makeshift reception area. He burst out laughing, pulling Emily close. Mad? I've never been happier in my life. As guests began to arrive, friends and family who had been secretly notified, Jack made his way over to Sarah. You planned all this? He asked, shaking his head in disbelief. Sarah smiled up at him. Consider it my final test. And you passed with flying colors, my boy. Jack knelt down and hugged her tightly. Thank you, he whispered. Not just for this, but for everything. For showing me what really matters. Sarah patted his back. You showed me too, Jack. Now go, enjoy your wedding, and remember, you always have a mother in me. As Jack rejoined Emily on the dance floor, he looked around at the joy surrounding them. He had entered this arrangement looking for financial freedom, but he had found something far more valuable, a renewed appreciation for love, family, and the things that truly matter in life.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.